The NBA playoffs are where legacies are made. Every year, the top crop of talent set out to prove not only that they individually can compete at the highest level, but that they can help elevate their teams to the top of the mountain too, and those that succeed in doing so obviously receive a big bump by the public in terms of how they are viewed and ranked compared to the rest of the league. Certain players came in unproven, others have disappointed in the past, but for today's video, we'll be discussing 5 star players in particular that entered the playoffs this year with some of those stigmas surrounding them and have successfully proven all of the doubters wrong and have been playing at the highest level in the playoffs this year. Before we start though, it turns out about 62% of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so please, if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player that has been proving everyone wrong this year playing phenomenal basketball in the playoffs is Paul George of the Los Angeles Clippers. It's no secret that Paul George had a lot of pressure on him this year after the catastrophe that went down in the last postseason. The Clippers' downfall in last year's playoffs resulted in them being a laughingstock around the league, and George in particular got a large brunt of the blame because of how poorly he performed when it mattered most. This year, however, he came in with a fresh new mindset and has looked more like the Paul George of old that used to dominate on the big stage. His scoring has increased as he and the Clippers have advanced further and further into the postseason. He's been highly efficient in doing so, and most importantly, when Kawhi Leonard went down with an injury against the Jazz, Paul George stepped up and finished the job. Almost everybody counted out the Clippers when that Kawhi Leonard injury news broke, but George stepped up and played a major part in the team beating the 1-seed Jazz to advance the Clippers to their first ever conference finals appearance. The turnaround from last year to this year is so impressive for George, and he deserves all of the credit for it. Playoff P is back, and hopefully the days of way off P are long gone, because the slander that came his way at the time was way too much. The next star proving everyone wrong in this year's postseason to make this list is Trae Young of the Atlanta Hawks. Young's been a polarizing young player since he was drafted because he's forever going to be tied to Luka Doncic of the Mavericks since they were traded for each other on draft night. That's a pretty high bar to set for someone so young, yet Trae has absolutely lived up to the hype and more. His offensive production over the last 2 seasons has been absurdly impressive, but a lot of people have been skeptical to give him full credit for it, having that kind of production until he proved it could translate to winning basketball. And this year, that is exactly what he's done. The Hawks were not seen by anybody as a legitimate threat to beat the 1-seed Sixers in the second round, and despite the Sixers having a ton of problems themselves to fix, all credit goes to the Hawks, and Trae specifically, for balling out and getting the job done. Trae was being stalked by Defensive Player of the Year finalist Ben Simmons for the last 6 games of the series, which is as tough of a matchup as Trae will ever see, and even though Simmons did make life difficult for him to score consistently, Trae proved he could still take the matchup head on and impact the game all over the place. No better example exists than in Game 7 when Trae was admittedly having a poor shooting night, but he continued to attack, and his elite court vision and passing ability created so many great looks for teammates like Clint Capella, John Collins, and Kevin Huerter. He's one of the most dynamic offensive players in the league right now, and he's officially arrived on the big stage in the playoffs, proving himself for sure. The next player up on this list taking his game to another level on the big stage is Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. Booker has been one of the biggest examples of players that the general public has been hesitant to credit for his production due to the fact that through 5 seasons, he and the Suns had yet to make the playoffs. This season though, for the first time since his arrival with the team, they were built for the moment, and not only did they perform better than anybody could have possibly expected for them, but they're still chugging along, looking like a team that could genuinely win the whole thing. Booker has not been fazed at all by the moment, despite this being his first time in the playoffs, and nothing proved that more than his performance in Game 1 of the conference finals. In the biggest game of his career to this point, he put up 40 points, 13 rebounds, and 11 assists in a completely dominant performance that led to a win for the Suns without Chris Paul playing. Chris Paul has gotten a ton of credit for the elevation of the Suns this season, but Booker deserves just as much credit, and now with Paul sidelined for a bit longer, he is proving that he can still be that guy for this team. His ability to get to his spots and confidently pull up for quality looks, knock down mid-range jumpers and three-point shots, beat defenders off the dribble, and dominate the post as a guard is so fun to watch, and he's as legitimate of a number one option as there is in the league today offensively. The next player that falls into this wonderful category is Ja Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies. When the NBA introduced the play-in games this year, most assumed it would be the Golden State Warriors led by Steph Curry making it into the big dance, but Ja and the rising Grizzlies had other ideas. This young team pulled off the improbable by knocking off the multiple-time MVP winners team in that play-in game, and then when they faced off against the top-seeded Jazz in the first round, they continued to put up a fight until the very end. The Jazz would win the series in 5 games, but every game was pretty close. They came so close to pulling out gutsy wins several times, and Ja Morant individually was nothing short of brilliant. As another young player making his first playoff appearance this year, he played some of the best basketball of his life against the Jazz, averaging over 30 points and 8 assists in the series, both being more than he averaged in the regular season, and his ability to put constant pressure on the rim and finish strong through traffic made him a matchup nightmare. One of the biggest takeaways from this year's postseason, above all else, is that the league is in very good hands with the amount of young talent rising up and taking over, and Ja Morant is definitely in that crop of players responsible for it being the case. He's a legitimate face of a franchise, and the team will only get better and better as he continues to grow and mature. And finally, the last player we'll be discussing that makes this list is Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis is another top-tier player with 2 MVPs under his belt, but after getting swept by the Miami Heat in the second round last year, there was a ton of added pressure on him this season. Matching up with the Brooklyn Nets in the second round this year was also no easy task, and despite the Nets suffering several brutal injuries to key players, it was still a series that Giannis needed to assert himself, and assert himself he did. Kevin Durant was at the top of his game, playing better than ever, but Giannis matched him step for step, and it was the Bucks who came out on top in Game 7 of the series. Giannis averaged 32 points per game for the series as a whole, and in Game 7, he had an incredible performance of 40 points, 13 rebounds, and 5 assists to secure the victory and help the Bucks advance. His free throw struggles are glaring to many fans, but there is no denying that Giannis brought his A-game this postseason, and now the Bucks have as good of a chance as anyone to win the whole thing, and may even be the favorites to do so. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below your thoughts on these players elevating their games this postseason. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.